Okay, so in the previous lesson on how to configure end devices, we succeeded in generating traffic from host A to host B. So we're able to put two different clients on the canvas, and then we configured static IP addresses on them, and we were able to generate traffic, and we saw how the traffic came up from the Wireshark as we captured them. In today's lesson, we will be focusing on how to navigate, how to go around our devices, especially the Huawei router. And then we will look at how to display the system clock, how to display other activities. So the learning objective for today's lesson would be: 1, to configure device system parameters, including device name, the system time, and the system time zone. We'll also configure the console port idle timeout duration, configure the login information, configure the login password, save configuration files, configure IP addresses for router interfaces, then test the connectivity between two directly connected routers. And then we would learn how to restart a device using the versatile router platform, that's the VRP. So this is the topology we are going to look at in today's lecture. So let's delve in. We are dealing with networking here. So now, once our simulator is opened, as usual, what we do is we go to the routers. That is the device we are going to select. If it were a switch, we would have chosen it from the pool of switches, but we need a router. So we go to routers, and then we choose our first router. Then we choose our second router. And I told you, yes, for now, use the default router. Some of these routers may not start based on your configuration or your device standards. In other tutorials, I would explain how to get every other module here to start, or I would point you to places you can download the module features so that you can be able to configure some of these routers. So if you put any of these routers on the canvas and it fails to work, that is okay, because it happens most of the time. So for now, let's use the default router right here, because that one would not fail you. And whatever command we run there should run on any of these other devices. The same command cuts across through every other Huawei device. So now that we have these devices, we establish the connection by selecting a connector. So we pick our copper, or we can choose auto. Then we click on the first router here. Oops, I'm wondering why. So I pick my connector, and when I pick, we are going to use the gigabit connector. We are going to use the gigabit port. So we pick gigabit port 0/0/0 on this particular router, and then we connect it to the other one here, router 2 0/0/0. So now we have established the connection. And remember, you need to start the device before you can be able to log in and configure it. Now you would realize that the pieces up here in our previous tutorial, the signal is green, symbolizing that it is on. Once you see the red dot here, it means it is off. So we highlight the routers, and then we start it. We give it some time to start. So you realize that this is the topology we have achieved, which is right here. We have our topology there, and then the IP address we are going to use, it's going to be 10.0.13.0/24. So this is going to be a class C IP address that would resolve a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. That is what this particular /24 means. It means there is 24 bits for the network ID, and then there is 8 bits for the host ID. So that is why we have this particular 24 here, which translates to this one here as the subnet mask, and then this one being the IP. Now our devices should be ready to use. So when I double click on router 1, it takes us into the command view because it has only the console interface. Of course, we can have the web interface to the router, but it is a fresh router that we have not done any configuration on. We've not enabled the web view and other stuff. So the only thing we can do right now is log onto it via console, and then we do the necessary configuration. So once it is up this way, you can use the display version command to see the version of your firmware, then to know the OS your router is running on. And in my other tutorials or videos, I told you that the Huawei router runs on what is called the VRP, that is the Versatile Routing Platform. That is the software that Huawei devices use. And once you log onto the router, this particular mode you have seen or interface you have seen is what is called the global view, of which little can be done with this particular view. If you want to do detailed configuration or standard configuration on the device, you need to switch from the global view to the system view. But before then, again, when you start your router on a network, once you are going to configure it to run actively on the network, ensure that your date and time is up to date. Otherwise, you may have your router reporting maybe error in certificate verification, or it would probably not even browse. So it is ideal that you ensure that some of these things are up to date. And we do this by displaying the clock. So we check for your device clock. So we say display clock. So it gives you the date and time. So you realize that my date here is 2020-04-27th. So it's on the 27th of April, and then it gives us our time, gives me my time zone, and then maybe my day, which is a Monday. So if the date and time is wrong, what you do is you use the clock time zone to change your date and time. Like I also said in the other videos, you can use the question mark to get all the commands beneath a particular module. So I use the question mark to see the various commands under the Huawei router. So I could also type the clock time zone. Now what happens? I did this for you to see that it is not complete, and once it's not complete, it will fail to run. So I could use what? The question mark to find out why it is wrong. Then maybe I would have to set my time. So once I set my time and then other stuff, it accepts that. But now we are going to delve into what? Changing our router name. So we want our router name to be what? RT1, as in this particular scenario here. So we want our router name to be RT1, and then this one would be what? RT2. But for now we are on R1. So we want to change the name. But before we change the name, I told you we have to switch to what? The system view. So system-view, this is the command that allows us to log into the router as maybe an administrator, or we have the administrative interface of the router. So once we hit this, what do we see? We are inside the router's view. It was small. I guess you can see it much clearly now. Yes. So now we are in the system view. When you find the router's name in square brackets, it means you are in the system view. But if you find it in angle brackets, it means you are in what? The global view. And once you are in the global view, you cannot perform administrative actions. So now we use the sysname. So sysname, and then we specify the router name, which would be what? We said we want this to be RT1. So once we do this, you realize that your router name has been changed to what? RT1. We have succeeded in changing the name of our router. So the gibberish we are seeing down here is only confirming that we have configurations have taken effect. It has been changed to maybe so and so. So now that we've been able to configure our router to accept this, we want to see how to change our router's login mode so that it would accept the password on logon. So now we do what is called, we navigate to which particular interface or the interface we want to enable the authentication on. And right now we are logged onto the console port, which is the port 0. So it's the console port 0 of the device that we are going to log in. So we would enter it by saying user dash what interface. So you can also use the tab key to complete commands as you enter them. So user dash console 0. So once I enter, what happens? It specifies that I have navigated to the user interface console 0. So right now I am on what? User interface console 0. And what do? I then ask the authentication to be enabled. So I say authentication mode. So I use the tab key. If you don't know what is next, remember you can always use the question mark to find out. So you see that after typing authentication, I use the question mark, and the only other command beneath it is what? Authentication dash mode. So I can then proceed by saying dash what? Mode. Or if you know what you are doing, you just hit the tab key for it to accept. So now authentication mode, what happens? I use the question mark again to find out which of the authentication modes do I need. Do I need maybe accounting? Do I need that is the AAA authentication? Do I want it to prompt me? Do I want to be able to have maybe which access and so on and so forth? Then we also have none. You use none if you don't want to use any authentication. And then we use password if we want our system to accept what? Password. So we say authentication mode space password. And now when we put the authentication mode password, what are we going to do with this particular authentication mode password? It means it accepts it, right? So we hit enter. So at this particular point, we have asked this particular console port to accept passwords, but we have not actually set a password. So once we have done this, what we are going to do is tell it to accept a password. So we then say set maybe authentication space password. Then we can use this particular command and find out. Once we say set the password, we are ready to type the password. But again, do we want to use a simple password which would put our password in plain text, or we want to use what is called a cipher? When we say the cipher, it means it's going to encrypt the password we put, such that if any other person has access to our configuration, because we are supposed to submit our documentation to whoever would monitor the system. So if we want somebody to go through our configuration and not see the password, we want it to be encrypted, we use cipher. But if we want it in plain text, we choose simple. We can just leave it that way. But in our case, we want to be secured, so we select what? Cipher. So once we choose cipher, what do? We enter the password. It's asking for the string characters of our password. So our password, we just want to use the word password, and we enter. So at this particular point, our system password has been set on the console port. So you can use the kill or quit key to quit back to the global mode. Right now I am on the global mode. I can still type quit again to get out. Right now you see that before I get access to the router, I need to enter a password. If I close the console and I open it again, it's still asking me to enter an authentication password, and then I enter my password, which is password. Now I deliberately entered a wrong password, and now you see the error message displays there. The password is invalid. Now let's enter the password we chose, which is password. Now it gave us access again to our router. Remember, we need to get back to the system view. So we use system dash view to get access to the system view. So this allows us to be able to navigate through our router from global to system view, and then we saw how to create our console password. Now that we have understood how to create the password, we are also going to assign an IP address to router 1, and then we would come and assign an IP address to what? Router 2. So I will then say interface. So I am going to select this particular interface, which is gigabit Ethernet 0/0/0. So interface gigabit Ethernet 0/0/0. So once I am on it, I can then assign the IP address. So I then say IP, then I can use what? Our question mark as usual if you don't know what is going to be next, right? So IP space address, and then I enter my address. We said we are going to use 10.0. This now we want router 1 to be 10.0.13.0.1, whereas router 2 would be 10.0.13.2. So our router 2 is going to be this, and then our router 1 is going to be that. So we enter this as the router 1 IP address here. So I say this will be what? 10.0.13.1. Oops, you saw my error here. So it will be this. We are dealing with IP version 4, right? Now I also specify my subnet mask. So I can just say 24. Remember, there is a space. Consider the space that comes in before the IP address and then the subnet mask. So once I hit enter, it has accepted my command, giving that particular IP address to the said interface. So I can just say display this, and then it tells me that on this particular interface, it has assigned IP address 10.0.13.1 and then a subnet mask of 24 bits to it. Now I could also say display IP interface brief. I can use this particular command to view all the ports on my router. So these are all the ports on my router, and then the only port that is up is what? 0.0.0.0/0/0, and that is where I have assigned an IP address, and then a status is up. So we log on to the next router here. Then I go to the system view, and now we change the router name by saying sysname. Then this is going to be what? RT2. We have assigned the router name. So we are going to assign an IP address to its interface, which would be what? So interface, we are going to select the interface. So the gigabit Ethernet interface 0/0/0. I hit enter. Now what happens? We say IP address. So we are going to assign the IP address for the interface, which will be 10.0.13.2, and then the subnet mask will be what? 24. So now that I have succeeded in setting my IP address settings for the next router, let us generate traffic from router 1 to router 2, or from router 2 to router 1, and see. Our router 1 is this, and then router 2 is that. So we are going to ping router 2 from router 1. So we say here, let's ping router 2 from router 1. We say what? Ping 10.0.13.2. Then what happens? There is a reply sequence from our router 2. That means we have succeeded in creating or establishing a link between two routers. So it is as easy as that. We are able to set up our router, change the console authentication mode by setting a password to it, and now we have been able to assign our static IP addresses on both interfaces, and our ping request is going through. Thank you for taking part in this particular lesson, and I expect to see you in our other videos. You can always contact us via the following phone numbers, and then the website, or by mail, giyaka@uniskyteam.com, and then vug663@gmail.com. Don't also forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos. Thank you.